نريد لبنان ملتقى وفاق عربي.
Good afternoon. You're watching the English newscast here on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's headlines. A ceasefire agreement to evacuate tens of thousands of fighters and civilians from the remaining rebel-held pockets of eastern Aleppo suspended. No explanation was reportedly given. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he is working closely with Turkey to try and start a new series of Syrian peace talks aimed at securing a nationwide ceasefire. And MP Ibrahim Kanaan says the Free Patriotic Movement will launch a second stage of talks with rival factions to discuss a new Lebanese electoral law. A ceasefire agreement to evacuate tens of thousands of fighters and civilians from the remaining rebel-held pockets of eastern Aleppo has been suspended. WHO said 8 agencies and vehicles were ordered to leave the area without explanation. But a Syrian government official overseeing the operation said it was suspended due to obstructions. The government-run Sana news agency reported that rebel groups were attempting to smuggle prisoners and heavy weapons out with them, violating the evacuation deal. The Turkish state news agency, meanwhile, said pro-government forces first attacked the convoy, and a rebel commander confirmed the claim.
We understand that the evacuation operation has been aborted this morning, but we hope very much that it will resume, because we know that there are many people still in last besieged enclaves in East Aleppo that want to go out. What we hear is that so far, until 7 o'clock this morning, 194 patients were evacuated from East Aleppo and were taken care of in hospitals in Idlib Governorate and Western Rural Governorate. And some people have been referred because of their medical conditions to hospitals in Turkey. World Health Organization has no information why evacuations have stopped, but we are ready to continue to work with the Syrian Arab Red Crescent and International Committee of Red Cross to provide necessary assistance to those who are evacuated, to make sure that ambulances are in place and that hospitals that receive patients have necessary medical supplies.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says he is working closely with Turkey to try and start a new series of Syrian peace talks aimed at securing a nationwide ceasefire. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu, meanwhile, said talks between the Syrian government and opposition forces would take place soon in Kazakhstan, adding that Turkey would not speak directly to Syrian government officials. France is also reportedly drafting a UN Security Council resolution that aims to ensure international observers are deployed to process the evacuation of civilians from Aleppo and enable humanitarian aid to reach the Syrian city. Now for some news in Lebanon, MP Ibrahim Kanaan says the Free Patriotic Movement will launch a second stage of talks with rival factions to discuss a new Lebanese electoral law. Kanaan said the party had ended its first phase of consultations with the country's main parties by meeting with Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri and his Development and Liberation Bloc. The second stage will include contacts with rivals away from the media spotlight, the lawmaker told reporters from Ain Tine. He expressed the FPM's openness to discuss all vote law proposals, but said the proportional representation system is the only electoral law capable of guaranteeing the representation of all parties. Kanaan added that the FPM delegation agreed with Berri on the need to accelerate the negotiations, as the country's elections will be staged in May of 2017. Meanwhile, MP Ali Fayyad said the FPM and Amal were unified in their support of the adoption of a proportional voting system. Prime Minister-designate Saad Hariri is still striving to set up a new government ahead of the holiday season. Hariri met with MP Walid Jumblat last night as part of his intensive consultations with leaders to clear the way for the formation of a national unity government comprising the country's major political parties. Hariri did not speak to reporters after the meeting held at Jumblat's residence, but sources said the meeting was designed to discuss the Druze representation in an expanded 30-member government. Caretaker Defense Minister Samir Muqbil has suspended firearms permits in Lebanon starting the end of December until the beginning of the new year. In a statement released by the ministry, the caretaker minister said the decision will be effective from December 23rd until January 2nd. Permits would only remain valid for bodyguards of former or current ministers and MPs, party heads, diplomats, and spiritual leaders. The statement warned that the suspension will be strictly enforced and violators will face prosecution. It called on the Lebanese Army Command to firmly impose the implementation of the decision and refer violators to the military tribunal. Coming up next, the Chinese capital issues a red alert for severely high levels of air pollution. Stay tuned. Welcome back. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump will nominate David Friedman, a right-wing lawyer known for his staunch support for Israel, as the next U.S. ambassador to Israel. Friedman, who has no diplomatic experience, is a supporter of Israel's Jewish-only settlements in the occupied West Bank, which are considered illegal under international law. His appointment is likely to rattle the Middle East. More details in this report.
The Trump administration will never pressure Israel.
The man set to be the U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman's considered a far-right hardliner whose appointment is sure to rattle the Middle East. Donald Trump announcing Thursday that he'll nominate Friedman, signaling a seismic shift in decades-long foreign policy. The bankruptcy attorney welcomed the announcement, saying he's looking forward to taking up his post in Jerusalem. That's a clear nod to Trump's pledge during the election campaign to shift the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, all but enshrining the city as Israel's capital. Such a move would anger Palestinians who regard the ancient city as the future capital of a separate state. It could also provoke the wider Muslim world, who'd prefer the U.S. take a less partisan stance in one of the world's most protracted disputes. Friedman has also expressed support for the annexation by Israel of large parts of the West Bank and promised not to put any pressure on Israel to reach a two-state solution with the Palestinians.
Beijing's city government has issued a red alert for severely high levels of air pollution in the Chinese capital, running for 5 days starting this evening. The city issued its first ever red alert on smog in December last year after adopting a color-graded warning system and a crackdown on environmental degradation left by decades of breakneck economic growth. Smog expected this week will stem from air pollution accumulated in Beijing and its environs, such as the nearby city of Tianjin and the northern provinces of Hebei. Still in Asia, South Korea's agricultural minister has raised the country's bird flu alert status to the highest level for the first time and vowed to make all-out efforts to fight the virus that's spreading at an unprecedented rate by expanding quarantine measures and stepping up disinfection operations. 16 million birds have reportedly been culled since the outbreak began last month. Ryan Brooks reports.
South Korea's bird flu alert is at its highest level for the first time ever, as officials warn that an outbreak of the virus has spread to birds nationwide.
This virus appears to be more highly pathogenic and is spreading more quickly than in 2014.
Authorities have been ramping up quarantine measures since the virus flared up last month. They've banned movement of all poultry and killed and buried 16 million birds. That's about 12% of the total population. The country was already on edge about food safety after 2 other outbreaks earlier this year. One a different strain of bird flu, the other foot and mouth disease in pigs. So far, this latest outbreak hasn't spread to humans in South Korea, but if it does, it could pose a serious threat. This same type of bird flu has killed 6 people in China in the past 2 years.
The dollar has climbed towards a 14-year peak as global markets are adjusting to the idea of higher U.S. interest rates, triggering worries over who stands to lose from a higher greenback. Emerging markets are seen as one major casualty. Kate King reports.
The strong greenback returns, the dollar index jumping to a 14-year high of 103.56 on Friday. It follows the Federal Reserve's decision to hike interest rates and indicate another 3 more are on their way in 2017. Good news for America's consumer-driven economy, right?
The US is a big importer of goods from around the world, and assuming we don't see many protectionist measures from Donald Trump, which I guess is a big possibility, then the US consumer, the purchasing power of the consumer, is always going to be improved.
But when it comes to Donald Trump, nothing is certain, and a strong US dollar raises concerns about the so-called boomerang effect. It makes local products more expensive and less attractive, a direct threat to Trump's plans to slash the trade deficit and his promise to create more manufacturing jobs.
When you've got things like productivity improving, this is a thing that can help offset the strengthening dollar. So it's all going to be a case of how well these companies have adjusted to this higher growth environment in the US.
The greenbacks rally has also put pressure on emerging market currencies and stocks. Developing countries have more than $200 billion in dollar-denominated bonds and loans due next year. But they aren't the only ones feeling the ripple effect. China on Friday set the yuan's midpoint at its weakest since 2008, amid fears the rising dollar will destabilize trade, and that could further push emerging market exchange rates down.
The A-list cast of Collateral Beauty has walked the red carpet in London for the film's European premiere. The emotional drama, directed by David Frankel, explores the themes of loss, grief, family, and friendship. Here are a few reactions.
He writes letters. Who are they to? Howard doesn't write letters to people. He writes to things. Time. Love. Death.
Kids write letters to Santa Claus. It doesn't mean they're crazy.
No, this is therapeutic.
You're gonna think I'm crazy, but I'm having conversations. Death came first. She met me in the dog park.
Charmed, I'm sure. So death is a her.
Turns out death is an elderly white woman.
For the first time, I'm sort of looking and thinking about my career as a whole, you know, so it's you know, fun to have a brushstroke like Collateral Beauty on the you know, the whole collage.
Really, this is a really uplifting and a hopeful movie, ultimately, you know, and it has a really beautiful message, and the message is about togetherness and appreciating your loved ones and not taking them for granted, and I think that's the message we need at Christmas now more than ever.
It was a very team effort. I thought it was, you know, when you get into doing this sort of thing, you hope you're going to end up in one of these ensembles. I never take it for granted, you know. I think being with actors like this is it hasn't lost its thrill for me. It's really fun.
I think I'd like to have a conversation with time, only because I kind of want more of it, you know. I'm greedy, and probably in my life I've wasted too much of it, as we all do. So I would beg for a little more time, if you don't mind.
He's reaching out to the cosmos for answers. Just be sure to notice the collateral beauty. It's the profound connection to everything.
He accepts that. Maybe he gets to find his life again.
You're not here to take me, are you?
No, Howard. I'm here to ride the F train with you.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. A ceasefire agreement to evacuate tens of thousands of fighters and civilians from the remaining rebel-held pockets of eastern Aleppo is suspended. No explanation was reportedly given. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he is working closely with Turkey to try and start a new series of Syrian peace talks aimed at securing a nationwide ceasefire. And MP Ibrahim Kanaan says the FPM will launch a second stage of talks with rival factions to discuss a new Lebanese electoral law. Those are your top stories for this Friday. I'm Linda Tamim, and I wish everyone watching a very nice weekend.
نريد لبنان ملتقى وفاق عربي